Hey homies, what up? It's the Tominator, and this time we're finally going to be talking about the 2017 Mr. Olympia, now less than 2 weeks away. So I know a lot of people like to make predictions, top 5, top 10s, and that sort of thing, but that's not exactly what I want to do here. Because I'll be honest with you, I don't follow any of these guys on social media. I don't even have a Twitter account, Snapchat, Instagram, none of that. And I barely ever go on Facebook, so no, I don't really fuck with any of that social media stuff, okay? Frankly, that's because I think it's superficial and mostly a big waste of time. Now, I get it has its merits. It's great for keeping up with the latest trending topics and news stories, and would probably actually be pretty useful for me now with my channel when covering topics like this, but whatever, it's cool. But while we're on the topic of social media, it's gotta be said that all these progress pics don't mean shit. Ramy does the same thing every goddamn year, and everybody jumps on the hype train, but then he always shows up a little off and disappoints come contest day. It's almost become this bizarre type of tradition now. And that's not hating, it's just an objective observation. Dennis James said it too, because he used to do the same thing back in the day. You just take a bunch of pictures right after your workout when you're swole as fuck and post the best ones. Nowadays, there's fancy filters to make them look even better and grainier too. The bottom line is that it's a lot easier to look amazing when you're standing by yourself with a sick pump in flattering lighting than when you're standing next to other top bodybuilders on stage under those bright lights, right? And this goes for everybody, not just Big Ramy. As impressive as these photos may be, none of this counts for shit come contest day, and so if history tells us anything, you shouldn't put much stock in it. But anyway, the main thing I want to focus on in this preview is not so much what I predict will happen, because like I just said, I don't closely monitor the progress of these bodybuilders, and their workout photos can't be trusted anyway. So for me to make predictions at this point would frankly just be guesswork and not very meaningful. We'll see what's what when they actually step foot on stage, then I can tell you something. But for now, I just want to discuss my biggest hopes for this year's contest. You could say this is my best case scenario for the 2017 Mr. Olympia. At the same time, I'm going to try to maintain at least some measure of realism with these speculations, but this possible outcome I'm about to describe to you is something I feel would also be good for the long-term health of the sport in order to make the Olympia great again. So first up, whether you like it or not, Phil Heath is winning this contest as far as I'm concerned. That's pretty much a given. He's won it 6 straight times now, and if last year is any indication, he's showing no signs of slowing down. Truth be told, I actually want him to win. I know, I can already hear you guys crying, fanboy, but at this point, the major reason I want him to repeat is so that he can eventually break the record in less than 3 years' time and clinch his 9th Sandow, because then we will have witnessed history in the making, okay? And I think it will make these last couple of boring and predictable years kind of worth it in a sense. The one caveat to all this is that he better be on. Don't put us through this again, dude. Because as we all saw in 2014, even with a burgeoning bubble gut and in the worst shape of his life, the judges still saw fit to give him the title. So if a very good version of Kai Green couldn't defeat him then, looking like this, who's going to beat him now? So yeah, the way I see it, if he's pretty much guaranteed to be the champion anyway, he at least better look the part and truly earn it. My ideal, Phil Heath? Bring the fullness from 2013 and combine that with the dry, grainy conditioning of 2016, and that'd be completely unstoppable. That's like the ultimate bodybuilder. So that's what I hope to see from him this year, but if that's too much to ask, and it probably is, just come in fuller again, please. I think that's where he's at his best. Even though both years were great for him, personally I much prefer his shape and aesthetics in 2013 to what we saw last year, where he looked a little more blocky and depleted. As for second place, now here's where things get interesting. Or at least I seriously hope they do, because what I definitely don't want to see again is Sean Roden or Dexter Jackson as the runner-up. No offense to these guys or their fans, because they are superbly talented bodybuilders. Dexter's easily among the top 10 of all time, and he's in my personal top 10 favorite bodybuilders as well. But the fact is, neither one of them can overcome Phil Heath. We've already seen them give it their best shot, so that's not even really up for debate. As I mentioned in a previous video, Roden can't beat him because of his inferior back and arms. And Dex can't beat him because Phil destroys him in the lower body. So these guys are not legitimate threats at all, and frankly, it's a waste to have them filling out the top 3. Sorry, but I gotta tell it how it is. Does that mean I don't anticipate they'll place well this year? Hell no, I totally expect at least one of these guys to crack top 3 again, and it'd be shocking if either of them slipped out of the top 5. But I don't think it's ultimately good for the sport to see them go 2 and 3 again, because it's just too predictable and it paves the way for another easy anticlimactic victory for Phil. So the main things I want to see this year are some shakeups and some actual competition. So let's get some new blood in there, man. Tell these old dudes to step aside and let these young cats have their moment in the sun. So on that note, my ideal candidate for runner-up is Big Ramy. And yes, perhaps the most habitually overhyped bodybuilder of all time, but there's good reason for that. The dude is a freak of nature. So this is the guy I really want to see step up his game and finally put it all together and find that elusive combination of size and fullness plus hard, dry conditioning that's been evading him his entire career. Come on, man, we've been waiting patiently for years now. Don't disappoint us again. I really hope Ramy can finally live up to all his potential this time and just come in as great as we all know he can and be the guy to push Phil and really give him a run for his money. Because somebody majorly needs to fill the void left by Kai, and Ramy is the best man for the job. And speaking of Kai, I'm not really going to talk about him here because even though he did receive that special invite, last I heard it seems almost certain that he's not going to participate. Now, if he does decide to make a surprise appearance at the last minute, we should definitely expect another epic battle on our hands like what they brought us in 2012 and 2014. He would, of course, be the automatic favorite to take second if he shows, but I seriously doubt he will. So back to Big Ramy. Now with Kai Green out of the picture, Ramy is the only one who can truly threaten for the title. Jay Cutler himself has said that if Ramy ever gets it together and comes in at 100%, he can beat Phil in just about every single pose. And while I think that's something of an exaggeration, because I don't care how much of a size advantage he has, he's going to be hard-pressed to take out Phil in the back double bicep or most muscular, but it's definitely true that he can dwarf him and simply overpower him up there. So if by some minor miracle he can manage to come in equally conditioned, then the reigning Mr. O better watch out. Now, I know some of you are probably thinking I'm full of shit right now, or that I completely flip-flopped, because you may have seen my old video on how I claim Big Ramy will never be able to become Mr. Olympia due to politics, and if so, you may have labeled me as a huge Ramy hater or something, and maybe it did come across as hating because that was in fact my most disliked video to date, at least in terms of the ratio. I think it actually still has more dislikes than likes, so that like bar is looking pretty atrocious. And to be fair, I can kind of understand why. My delivery was admittedly terrible, and I didn't prepare well beforehand, and went off on these long rambling tangents, so yeah. That was actually one of my first videos, and it would prove to be one of the major reasons I decided to start scripting most of my newer stuff in order to sound more professional and less like I'm just talking out of my ass. But nevertheless, even though my delivery might have sucked, I still stand by the underlying message in that video. And I know it's not a very popular opinion. Most people probably assume it's just a matter of time before Ramy takes over and wins this thing, but I honestly believe, and I know I'm going to catch a lot of flack and probably get flamed in the comments for even suggesting this, but I honestly believe that the IFBB will never allow a Muslim from Egypt who barely speaks English to be crowned Mr. Olympia, okay? That's the ultimate champion and ambassador of their sport. Oh, I know, that sounds incredibly racist and bigoted even to say, and yes, I'm aware Ramy has drastically already improved his English. I've seen the Generation Iron interview, so kudos to him, but it's still not exactly fluent. But this goes beyond simply English. It's not just a language barrier, guys. Do you really imagine a corrupt organization in today's America is going to let something like this happen when they already wouldn't allow a man of Serbian-Egyptian descent like Nasser El-Sambadi or a perfectly well-spoken Dominican like Victor Martinez win when they surely deserve to? So this is one of those rare occasions where I really hope to be proved wrong. I'd love to eat my words about this one day, but as of right now, this is just what I predict based on the way the IFBB seems to operate and their slimy track record with these dubious Olympia placings. Not what I personally condone, okay? So don't shoot the messenger, guys. I repeat, please don't shoot the messenger. In my opinion, it should always be a case of may the best man win, and the physique itself is the only factor the judges should be concerned with. But clearly that's not how the Olympia works in practice, and you're kidding yourselves if you think otherwise. Once again, I don't support these discriminatory practices. I'm simply conveying to you how I realistically think it's all going to go down. So can you understand the distinction there? Probably some of you Ramy fanboys still don't get it, but whatever. I'm not going to sugarcoat it for the delicate snowflakes out there. So yes, I still maintain that the IFBB, with their corrupt political agenda, would find some contrived way to screw him over and prevent a person like Ramy from ever winning, no matter what. But for the record, I'm not making excuses for him, because it should be noted that up until this point, Ramy's never deserved to win the Olympia anyway. Hell, he's never even come close. So for now, all this talk of politics is basically a moot point. I am aware of that, so please don't bother pointing it out in the comments section. We're talking strictly hypothetical here, you dig? So needless to say, I don't think Big Ramy has any chance of winning it this year. I'd actually be less surprised to see him come in off and fall outside the top 6 altogether than to dethrone Phil. While neither outcome is likely, the former would certainly be more in line with his contest history, because we're talking about someone who's never even cracked top 3 before, right? Someone who routinely finishes in that 4th to 6th position. So for him to jump from 4th to 2nd is already a bit of a stretch and a huge improvement. But nonetheless, call me a starry-eyed optimist, because that's exactly what I hope to see in store here for Ramy. And I even think it's fairly realistic, considering how he's a veteran now and has been gradually working his way up the ladder these past few years, improving his placings every time. In any case, I think that we can all agree that Phil desperately needs some real competition, somebody who's going to give him a bit of a scare and make that final announcement for first place a bit more nerve-wracking and suspenseful. So hopefully Big Ramy can be the one to fulfill that role. I would love to see it happen. After Ramy, again, I'd like to see some more new faces in the top call-out. I think it'd be amazing if, say, Cedric really nailed his conditioning and was challenging for top 3, or even Rolly Winkler. These are the sorts of guys I'd like to see vying for 3rd. Again, no offense to Dexter and Rodin, I just want to witness something different this year. I'm really rooting for these two in particular because Cedric brings probably the most aesthetic body to the stage today, and I love the old school posing he's been doing lately. It's very artistic and classy and deserves a ton of recognition. And as for Rolly, man, what can I say? I'm a fan. This guy's a beast. You might not have the best overall development or flow, but he does boast one crazy set of guns, and the delts are insane as well. His most muscular is just freaking ridiculous right now. In my opinion, he's the only person who can hold his own against Phil and kind of neutralize him in poses like this, and the side triceps too, by virtue of his world-class arms. In a lot of ways, he reminds me of a modern-day Lee Priest. And that might sound like a weird comparison to make, but note that I say modern-day version, because he's definitely more of a mass monster and less aesthetic than Lee. But in both cases, here you have a shorter guy who's maybe not the most complete, but who has some truly freaky features, including arguably the best arms in the world. And I even gave Rolly the majority of poses when I pitted him up against Phil Heath, and they went head-to-head last year. So I'd love for those two to actually stand side by side in that first call-out, so I could make a more accurate assessment and not have people complaining left and right about the scaling of their pictures being off. Because aside from the back poses, I would firmly argue that Rolly measures up very favorably next to Phil, and I think the only way people will be able to see and appreciate this is if and when they physically stand next to each other. Another guy I'm very much looking forward to seeing is Brandon Curry. If he can duplicate his conditioning from the New Zealand Pro, watch out, people. He looked amazing at that show. The surprise of the year, if you ask me. If the IFBB had a Most Improved award, it would surely go to him. He really stepped it up. I mean, this was shades of Phil Heath in that back double bicep, with just thickness and ridges everywhere. Again, though, just like Dexter, Brandon doesn't have the wheels to hang with Phil, but in terms of the upper body, he could definitely stand his ground if he brings that same package to the Olympia. If he's able to do this, which I sincerely hope he can because it'd be a shame for him to regress at this point, I would say Brandon Curry is a potential top 6 material. Another guy who fits the same sort of mold is Lionel Bayecki. Both of these guys are a little on the smaller side, but both have those nice round muscle bellies. Bayecki, I think, has perhaps the best lines in the entire Olympia lineup, and that includes Cedric, mind you, with a very streamlined waist. For my money, this is the closest thing we have to an old-school Flex Wheeler. It was unfortunate, but he kind of mistimed it earlier this year at the Arnold Classic and disappointed me there, so I'd love to see him nail it here and crack the top 10, because aesthetic physiques like this deserve to be noticed and rewarded. Alright, then there's some relative newcomers like Nathan DeAsha and Joshua Lenarkowicz. His name's difficult to say, but who have, these guys have both impressed me so far. Nathan mainly for his tight waist and incredible X-frame, and Josh for his hard granity conditioning and awesome front lat spread. This guy is certifiably Dorian-esque in those respects. And while I think both Nathan and Josh should be able to crack top 10 in this show, I don't quite see them making top 6 yet. Some people are already hailing DeAsha as a potential future Mr. Olympia, but I have to respectfully disagree. I know it's early to say either way, but from what I've seen so far, those high lats are going to seriously hold him back. It's very difficult to win at the highest levels with lats like that, and for this reason alone, I don't think he'll ever claim a Sandow. What I see when I look at Nathan is the next Dennis Wolf, a great bodybuilder with a unique appeal and a potential top 3 contender, but not quite Mr. Olympia material. Again, that's perhaps premature to say, and I may be proven wrong, but that's my gut reaction at this point. And also, we gotta mention William Bonac. You cannot sleep on this guy, man. He really made his mark last year when he finished 5th. because prior to this, I don't think I'd ever even heard of him, to tell the truth, but he impressed me a lot there. Bonak's kind of like a shorter, stockier Kai Green with those super low lat insertions and thick overall development, but more like a smaller version of Phil Heath from the front when it comes to the roundness in the arms and delts. Of course, that's a very flattering depiction because he's not nearly as good as either of them, but still, that's probably the best way I'd sum up his look. However, I don't see him improving on the 5th place finish from last year. He'll probably hold around the same position or maybe slide down a couple of spots. The 5th to 7th would be my guesstimate, but truth be told, he's not one of the main bodybuilders I'm really rooting for or excited to see, at least not compared to most of the other guys I've just mentioned. Now, lastly, as for Dexter Jackson and Sean Roden, where does this leave them? I'm not trying to hate, but honestly, I wouldn't mind seeing both these guys fall outside the top 5, just so we can finally see some fresh faces up there alongside Phil. But like I said earlier, I don't think that's likely to happen, so expect both to remain in the top 5. I just hope they're bringing up the rear as opposed to the front of that lineup this time around. And I will say, my hat is off to Dexter, man. He's a true Iron Warrior with unparalleled consistency and longevity, so you gotta give him mad props for his illustrious career. But still, everybody's gotta hang him up at some point, even the immortal Blade, and I think that day is fast approaching for him. I wouldn't be surprised if this ends up being his last contest, especially if he falls outside the top 3. And same with Sean for that matter. I think his best days are already behind him. And while it's true Roden's only been near the top for the past 4 or 5 years, what you may not know is that he's already over the age of 40, so this dude is several years the senior of Phil Heath. So he peaked very late and really has nowhere to go but down as well. But anyway, let's wrap this up. So that's kind of my thoughts on what I hope to see in the 2017 Mr. Olympia. What do you guys think? I feel I covered all the major players, but let me know if I overlooked someone. Also, feel free to leave a like and subscribe for more if you enjoyed, especially if you're interested in hearing my take on the show in a couple weeks once it's all over and the dust is settled. I plan to definitely be making at least 2 or 3 review videos to cover this so-called Super Bowl of bodybuilding, so I hope you'll tune in for that. But until next time, homies, I'm the Tominator signing off, and I'll be back.